Have you ever wondered what really happens when the stadium lights go out and the massive cameras finally stop rolling? We all know BTS as global superstars, breaking records left and right, but who are they exactly behind closed doors? Are they demanding divas, or is there a completely hidden truth the media just isn't telling us? Rumors about how celebrities treat their crew always swirl around, but what did their actual bodyguards, stylists, and managers confess when nobody was watching? Are you ready to uncover the shocking reality behind their flawless image? Brace yourselves, because the truth about how they treat the people working behind the scenes will leave you speechless, and our number one spot is absolutely unbelievable. Let's dive right in. Number 7. Jin, the ice-breaking king. Imagine the absolutely suffocating tension of $1 million music video production set, a chaotic environment where every single minute passing costs thousands of dollars. The directors are screaming through megaphones, and the crew is running on literally 2 hours of sleep, fueled entirely by cheap instant coffee and pure, unadulterated adrenaline. In the hyper-competitive, intensely high-stakes world of the South Korean entertainment industry, the air can get so thick with anxiety that you could cut it with a knife, and the strict, age-old hierarchy dictates absolute obedience and terrifying formality. There is even a notorious cultural concept known as gapjil, an ugly phenomenon where powerful celebrities or executives wield their immense status to humiliate, degrade, and completely crush the spirits of the lower-ranking staff members behind closed doors. Now picture the heavy studio doors opening and the eldest member of the biggest, most influential boy band in the history of the world walking in. You would naturally expect an intimidating entourage, ridiculous diva demands for artesian water, or maybe just a cold, terrifying silence that makes everyone hold their breath, right? But this brings us to Kim Suk-jin, famously and affectionately known across the globe as Worldwide Handsome, a man whose sheer visual perfection and monumental wealth could easily make anyone shrink back in pure intimidation. Yet the absolute reality of how Jin operates behind the scenes shatters every single stereotype of a pampered celebrity, and it all starts with his deliberate, genius, and deeply compassionate use of something so unbelievably simple: his dad jokes. You see, while millions of fans around the world simply laugh at Jin's infamous Ajay gags on camera, former staff members and industry insiders have revealed a deeply moving, almost psychological secret behind them. He doesn't just tell these corny jokes because he finds them amusing. He strategically and intentionally uses them as a psychological tool to break the ice, instantly dismantling the intimidating, terrifying wall between a global megastar and a terrified rookie stylist, a stressed-out camera assistant, or an exhausted lighting technician. Can you truly fathom the level of emotional intelligence it takes for a phenomenally famous icon to purposely make himself look a little silly, risking his own cool image just so a makeup artist's hands will stop trembling? A specific heartwarming anecdote from a former crew member completely took over Korean online community boards a few years ago. She vividly described a brutal, freezing outdoor shoot during the dead of winter, where the wind chill was violently cutting through multiple layers of thick winter coats and everyone's fingers were numb to the bone. The morale on set had hit rock bottom, people were on the verge of physical collapse, and the director was incredibly on edge. The stylist assistant accidentally fumbled with a small detail on Jin's outfit because her hands were shaking so violently, both from the freezing cold and the intense, paralyzing pressure of the set. In a cutthroat industry where a tiny mistake like that could get a rookie aggressively fired on the spot or verbally abused by a sensitive idol having a power trip, how did Kim Suk-jin react? He didn't sigh in annoyance, he didn't roll his eyes, and he certainly didn't call for the head stylist to reprimand her. Instead, he flashed that blindingly warm, reassuring smile, leaned in slightly to close the distance, and delivered one of his famously terrible eye-rolling puns in such a goofy, wildly exaggerated manner that the terrified junior staff member completely forgot her overwhelming terror and burst into genuine tension-releasing laughter. He deliberately played the fool just to give her a crucial moment to breathe and regain her shattered confidence, completely resetting the heavy atmosphere of the entire set. But his profound empathy absolutely does not stop at just lightening the mood. It dives so much deeper into an unwavering, fundamental respect for human dignity, regardless of social rank or paycheck. In South Korea's famously rigid age and seniority-based culture, being the eldest, the Hyung, gives you the automatic, unquestioned right to command respect, to sit back, and to be served by those younger than you. Yet Jin completely, masterfully flips this cultural script on its head, adopting a persona fans fondly call the matne, the oldest brother who acts like the youngest. This isn't just a cute, endearing personality quirk for the cameras, it is a highly sophisticated, incredibly selfless emotional shield. By actively rejecting the traditional, often oppressive authority of the eldest brother in a strict Confucian society, Jin ensures that not only do his younger bandmates feel completely safe coming to him with their deepest struggles, but the massive production staff also feel entirely comfortable approaching him to adjust a microphone, fix a stray piece of hair, or ask for an exhausting retake without the paralyzing fear of triggering a superstar's tantrum. A former bodyguard once revealed in a candid interview that Jin never, ever treats the massive security team as invisible background fixtures or human shields. When they travel overseas, navigating the absolute terrifying chaos of screaming mobs and blinding airport camera flashes, Jin always makes it a point to establish direct eye contact with the exhausted men protecting him, offering subtle, deeply sincere nods of gratitude. Furthermore, there have been countless testimonies and eagle-eyed observations from behind-the-scenes footage, like during their restorative reality show In the Soup, where Jin is seen cooking massive, incredibly elaborate meals. Cooking for a large group takes a tremendous amount of physical energy after a grueling day of filming. Yet Jin doesn't just cook for himself and his bandmates. He is constantly seen preparing extra, heaping portions, secretly sneaking plates of hot, meticulously cooked food to the exhausted camera directors and audio technicians, who have been standing frozen behind the lenses for hours, completely ignored by the spotlight. In Korean culture, the act of feeding someone is the ultimate, profound expression of jung, a deep, unspoken emotional connection and boundless affection. By quietly sharing his food and secretly paying for staff dinners out of his own incredibly deep pockets without ever demanding a camera to film his good deeds for PR, Jin completely dissolves the cold, rigid boundary between the multi-millionaire talent and the minimum wage hired help, transforming a highly stressful workplace into a warm, familial sanctuary. He treats his staff not as disposable employees, but as equal valued co-authors of his astronomical success. It truly makes you stop and reflect, doesn't it? In a modern world where absolute power, unimaginable wealth, and blinding fame usually corrupt people to their very core, turning them into demanding, out-of-touch divas who scream at crying interns for simply getting their morning coffee order wrong, what does it genuinely say about a man who uses his monumental, untouchable status to deliberately shield, comfort, and feed those beneath him? If you were suddenly handed the keys to the world, adorned with billions of dollars and screaming fans, would you still have the sheer humility to look down, make a dad joke to comfort a shaking assistant, and personally hand a warm plate of food to the cameraman? Jin's incredible emotional warmth entirely sets the moral compass and tone for the group, proving to the world that true leadership isn't about barking arrogant orders from a pedestal, but about getting your hands dirty and creating a space where every single person feels human. And if you think the eldest member's behind-the-scenes behavior is enough to make you cry, just wait until you hear the absolutely mind-blowing, jaw-dropping confessions about what our number 6 member has been doing secretly in the recording studios and dance practice rooms, because the intense, deeply emotional way he pushes the production crew while fiercely protecting them will completely redefine your entire understanding of the word passion. Are you ready to dive even deeper into this unbelievable rabbit hole? Number 6. Suga, the silent guardian of the shadows. When you think of a legendary music producer who has absolutely conquered the global charts, shattered international records, and worked alongside some of the biggest musical icons in history, you usually picture a demanding, fiercely arrogant genius who dictates every single breath taken inside the recording studio. Enter Min Yoongi, known fiercely to the world as Suga of BTS and aggressively as the unapologetic rap powerhouse August D. To an outsider or a newly hired rookie staff member stepping into the massive HYBE building for the very first time, Suga's aura is undeniably the most terrifyingly intimidating out of all the 7 members. He is famously quiet, incredibly observant, and possesses an intense, piercing gaze that feels like it can read the very depths of your soul. In the grueling, high-pressure environment of music production and endless concert rehearsals, he is a notorious perfectionist, a man who will ruthlessly obsess over a single vocal breath or a microscopic snare drum beat until the early hours of the dawn. Because of this heavy, unyielding dedication to his craft, many junior staff members have openly confessed that they were initially petrified of him, tiptoeing around his studio, holding their breath just in case they accidentally interrupted the raw, volcanic flow of his musical genius. However, the absolute mind-blowing truth about how Min Yoongi actually treats the people working tirelessly in the shadows behind him is a complete 180-degree contradiction to his fiercely cold, untouchable exterior. In South Korea, there is a specific cultural term called tsundere, someone who appears incredibly cold, aloof, and completely indifferent on the outside, but harbors a deeply warm, fiercely loyal, and fiercely protective heart on the inside. Suga is the absolute living embodiment of this concept, and his specific brand of kindness is perhaps the most emotionally devastating because it is entirely stripped of any desire for praise, applause, or public recognition. Former managers and stylists have shared jaw-dropping stories that completely shatter the cold rapper illusion, revealing a man who operates on a profound level of silent empathy. Imagine being a totally exhausted camera assistant on a brutal 48-hour music video shoot. Your stomach is violently growling, but the chaotic schedule hasn't allowed a single soul to sit down and eat. Suddenly, a bottle of cold water and a perfectly wrapped sandwich abruptly appear in your line of sight. You look up, and there is Suga walking past you without even making a single ounce of eye contact, casually handing you the food as if it were a complete accident. He doesn't wait for a thank you, he doesn't smile for a camera, and he absolutely does not make a grand spectacle of his generosity. He just silently observes who is struggling, who is thirsty, and who is on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion, and he quietly steps in to fix it without making them feel embarrassed or indebted. This signature care without looking move, famously known among Koreans as the nonchalant tuk gesture, has become legendary among the BTS production crew. He remembers their favorite coffee orders, their allergies, and the tiny, seemingly insignificant details they mentioned months ago, dropping a perfectly timed snack into their hands with a dismissive, "I bought it on the way here," before disappearing down the hallway. But his silent guardianship extends far beyond just buying meals and handing out water bottles. It dives deep into a fierce, unspoken protection of his staff's physical and mental well-being in an industry that notoriously treats crew members like disposable machines. There is a famously heartbreaking yet inspiring story from the recording studio that perfectly encapsulates the pure essence of Min Yoongi. During the intense, agonizingly long periods of album production, where the pressure to deliver a Grammy-worthy hit is literally suffocating, Suga is known to practically live inside his studio, affectionately named the Genius Lab. But while he mercilessly pushes his own mind and body to the absolute breaking point, surviving on iced Americanos and sheer willpower, he absolutely refuses to subject the sound engineers and production assistants to the same brutal torture. Insiders have deeply testified that when the clock strikes past midnight, Suga will abruptly stop the session, look at the completely exhausted staff whose eyes are practically shutting, and bluntly order them to go home and sleep. He will literally take over the incredibly tedious, mind-numbing technical work of editing and mixing the tracks himself, pulling solitary all-nighters just so his staff can go back to their families and rest. Can you even begin to comprehend the sheer magnitude of that selflessness? In a cutthroat capitalist world where megastars routinely force their underpaid teams to stay awake for days just to stroke their own egos, Min Yoongi uses his immense authority to fiercely protect the health of his crew, taking the grueling burden entirely upon his own shoulders. Furthermore, during frantic, completely terrifying airport mob situations where thousands of screaming fans and ruthless paparazzi violently crush together, endangering everyone in their path, eagle-eyed fans and security personnel have constantly spotted Suga subtly using his own body to shield the female staff members and the smaller stylists. He will silently maneuver himself, extending a quiet arm or shifting his stance to absorb the chaotic pushing and shoving, ensuring that the crew walking behind him doesn't get trampled by the terrifying stampede. He does this all with a totally blank expression, never uttering a single word about it, never seeking validation. This deeply profound, silent empathy forces us to ask a truly reflective question. In an era perfectly obsessed with loud, performative activism and influencers broadcasting their every single good deed on social media for likes and clout, what does it genuinely mean to be a good person in absolute silence? Suga proves that true kindness doesn't need a megaphone, a camera flash, or an audience. True kindness is the quiet, unhesitating instinct to protect those who are vulnerable when literally no one else is watching. His deeply moving humility and silent guardianship have earned him a level of absolute, unbreakable loyalty from the Hybe staff that money simply cannot buy. They don't just respect him as a global superstar, they revere him as a fiercely protective older brother who would silently take a bullet for them without ever taking the credit. But if you think the silent, brooding rapper of the group has a shocking duality, brace yourselves because the absolute revelation about our number 5 spot will completely paralyze you. What happens when the literal sunshine of the group, the member famous worldwide for his blindingly bright smile, endless laughter, and boundless positive energy, enters the sacred, intensely terrifying grounds of the dance practice room? Are you ready to uncover the chilling, awe-inspiring truth behind the man who commands the stage with an iron fist and the secret, tear-jerking way he manages to fiercely discipline the crew while simultaneously holding their hearts in his hands? Number 5. Jhope, the terrifying dance dictator, the ultimate angel. When you hear the name J-Hope, your mind instantly conjures an image of blinding, radiant sunshine, a man who literally introduces himself to the entire world as your hope, armed with a heart-shaped smile that can melt the coldest of glaciers and an infectious booming laugh that acts as instant serotonin for millions of fans across the globe. Jungkook is universally celebrated as the mood maker, the energetic battery, and the absolute emotional core of BTS. But what if I told you that the very second the heavy soundproof doors of the HYBE dance practice room click shut, that warm, comforting sunshine completely evaporates, replaced instantly by an intimidating, razor-sharp aura that leaves even the most veteran staff members and backup dancers completely paralyzed with nervous anticipation? Welcome to the chilling, awe-inspiring reality of Captain Jung, the undisputed, terrifyingly strict dance leader of the biggest musical act on the planet. To truly understand how deeply and profoundly J-Hope respects the massive production crew working behind the scenes, you first have to understand the sheer, terrifying intensity of his professionalism. In the grueling, bone-crushing world of K-pop choreography, where a single misstep can ruin a multi-million-dollar stage production and waste hundreds of hours of lighting and camera programming, J-Hope rules the practice room with an iron fist. Former choreographers and backup dancers have openly confessed that his eyes miss absolutely nothing. He can spot a finger out of place, a microsecond of delayed timing, or a slightly asymmetrical formation from a mile away. When he sits in front of the playback monitor, the atmosphere in the room grows so incredibly tense that you could hear a pin drop. People literally hold their breath, terrified of his famously stern, unsmiling monitoring face. He doesn't scream, he doesn't throw tantrums, but his chillingly cold, ultra-focused critiques are so razor-sharp that they demand absolute, unquestionable perfection. But here is where the story takes a massive, emotionally devastating twist that will completely shatter your perception of him. This intense, terrifying strictness is never, ever born out of arrogance or a diva-like power trip. It is born out of a desperate, fiercely protective desire to honor the blood, sweat, and tears of the production staff. J-Hope pushes himself and his members to the absolute brink of human endurance because he knows that the lighting technicians have been programming lasers for 48 hours straight, the stage directors have barely slept in a week, and the camera operators are carrying 100-pound rigs on their shoulders just to capture their movements. He demands perfection on stage because he views anything less as a deeply disrespectful insult to the invisible crew who built that stage in the first place. And the very moment the director yells "cut" or the grueling practice finally ends, that terrifying, icy dictator vanishes in a blink of an eye, and the radiant, unbelievably humble angel instantly returns to heal the exhaustion of everyone in the room. The duality is so extreme that it gives the staff absolute whiplash. Backup dancers, who are tragically often treated as entirely disposable, invisible background props in the highly hierarchical entertainment industry, revere J-Hope as an absolute king among men. During his critically acclaimed historic solo headline performance at Lollapalooza, famously dubbed Hobapalooza, the incredible stories of his backstage behavior completely took over social media and industry forums. Despite carrying the soul-crushing, monumental pressure of being the very first South Korean artist to headline a major U.S. festival all by himself, entirely stripped of his 6 brothers, J-Hope did not hide in his luxury dressing room. Instead, he personally sought out every single member of his massive international dance crew. He didn't just learn their faces, he meticulously memorized every single one of their names, treating them not as hired help, but as honored, equal collaborators in his historic artistic vision. He bought them lavish meals, constantly checked on their physical condition in the sweltering Chicago heat, and showered them with deep, profound praise that left many of these hardened veteran street dancers in literal tears. This level of emotional warmth is completely hardwired into his DNA. Korean broadcast station staff members who have seen thousands of arrogant idol groups come and go consistently vote BTS as the most polite group in existence, and they always point directly to Jhope as the primary reason. After completely exhausting, deeply grueling pre-recordings for music shows that often last until 4 a.m., when every single person in the building is desperately rushing to go home and collapse into bed, Jhope is notoriously the very last person to leave the set. Why? Because he makes it his absolute non-negotiable personal mission to walk around the entire studio, finding every single camera operator, audio technician, and even the lowest-ranking janitorial staff to look them directly in the eye, flash his trademark blinding smile, and bow at a perfect, respectful 90-degree angle while shouting his heartfelt gratitude. He doesn't just say a generic "good job," he infuses the deeply exhausted, suffocating atmosphere with a massive, vibrant surge of pure energy, essentially acting as a human defibrillator for the entire production crew. There are incredible, heartwarming eyewitness accounts of Jhope literally picking up discarded water bottles and sweeping up confetti from the stage floor just so the cleaning ladies could get off their incredibly painful shifts a few minutes earlier. He completely obliterates the massive, untouchable pedestal of his own global superstardom, choosing instead to kneel down and serve the very people who serve him. It forces you to sit back and deeply reflect on the true nature of celebrity. When you possess the power, the immense wealth, and the terrifying authority to demand that the world bows to your every whim, what does it truly say about your character when you choose to use that immense power to become the emotional caretaker of hundreds of exhausted workers? How does a man who carries the unimaginably heavy burden of being everyone's hope find the impossible strength to recharge the batteries of everyone around him when his own battery is completely empty? Jung Ho-seok's profound, behind-the-scenes leadership proves that true authority isn't about making people fear you, it's about commanding so much absolute, unwavering respect through your own flawless work ethic and boundless empathy that people would gladly follow you into the dark. But if you think the unbelievable duality of the dance captain is enough to leave you completely speechless, you need to mentally prepare yourself for the jaw-dropping truth about our number 4 spot. What exactly happens when the genius, fiercely intellectual leader of BTS, the man who confidently spoke at the United Nations and navigates the impossibly complex global politics of the music industry, interacts with the terrified, hyper-stressed staff members who are desperately trying to manage his chaotic, notoriously clumsy nature? Are you ready to dive into the astonishing, completely unexpected reality of how the brain of the group fiercely protects his team behind closed doors? Number 4. RM, the clumsy genius who carries the weight of the world. When you picture Kim Namjoon, known globally as RM, the towering, fiercely intellectual leader of BTS, your mind instantly goes to the man who confidently stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly, delivering a profoundly moving, world-changing speech in flawless English that brought veteran diplomats to absolute tears. You envision a brilliant, intimidating mastermind with a certified IQ of 148, a lyrical genius who effortlessly navigates the impossibly complex, deeply cutthroat politics of the international music industry, and a global ambassador who sits across from presidents and world leaders with the poised, unshakable confidence of a seasoned statesman. To a newly hired stylist or a rookie production assistant entering the massive, intimidating halls of HYBE, the sheer crushing weight of RM's intellectual aura and unparalleled authority as the undisputed captain of the world's biggest musical act must feel incredibly terrifying. However, the jaw-dropping, entirely unbelievable reality of how RM interacts with the massive crew behind the scenes completely shatters this intimidating illusion in the most endearing, incredibly chaotic, and deeply emotional way possible. To truly understand the profound depths of Namjoon's humility, you must first be introduced to his legendary, universally feared alter ego, known affectionately by fans and staff alike as the God of Destruction. Despite having a brain that operates on an absolute genius level, RM is notoriously, comically, and sometimes dangerously clumsy. He loses his passports on international flights, he accidentally rips his own clothes backstage, and he unintentionally shatters expensive set props just by merely looking at them. In the insanely high-stress, fast-paced world of music video productions and live broadcast stages, where every single prop is meticulously curated and every second of delay costs tens of thousands of dollars, a massively destructive artist would typically be a production crew's absolute worst nightmare. Imagine the sheer heart-stopping panic when an incredibly expensive, delicate prop is suddenly snapped in half right before the director yells action. In a normal celebrity dynamic, the artist might arrogantly blame the prop assistant for making it too fragile, or simply walk away and let the scrambling staff clean up the mess. But what does Kim Namjoon do? The moment something breaks, the intimidating UN speaker instantly vanishes, replaced by a towering, incredibly apologetic giant who literally shrinks into himself out of pure, genuine guilt. Former staff members have hilariously and affectionately revealed that RM will instantly drop to the floor, profusely bowing at a complete 90-degree angle to the frantic prop masters, his face flushed with embarrassment as he loudly apologizes and immediately insists on paying for the damages out of his own deep pockets. He doesn't just say sorry, he actively tries to help tape the broken pieces back together with his notoriously clumsy hands, which usually prompts the terrified staff to gently push him away just to prevent further disaster. But this deeply endearing, chaotic clumsiness is just the very surface of his incredible relationship with the crew. The absolute awe-inspiring core of RM's leadership behind closed doors is his fierce, unwavering role as the ultimate protective shield between the grueling demands of corporate executives and the emotional well-being of the on-the-ground staff. Being the leader of BTS means he is the primary, exhausting bridge connecting the powerful, demanding agency management with the artistic vision of the group and the physical capabilities of the crew. When a grueling 24-hour shooting schedule pushes the lighting technicians and camera operators to the absolute brink of physical collapse, it is notoriously Namjoon who steps into the terrifyingly tense boardroom. He doesn't use his massive superstar status to throw a diva tantrum. Instead, he uses his brilliant, intensely logical mind to fiercely negotiate with the higher-ups, respectfully but firmly demanding longer break times and better catering for the exhausted crew members who don't have a voice to defend themselves. Furthermore, during their massive, record-breaking global stadium tours, navigating foreign countries can be an absolute logistical nightmare, and tragically, Korean staff members have sometimes faced subtle xenophobia or immense disrespect from local international organizers who only care about the artists. This is where RM's legendary, fiercely protective leadership truly shines in the shadows. Fluent in English and possessing an intensely commanding presence when necessary, RM has been quietly observed by industry insiders firmly putting his foot down with foreign directors and security heads, explicitly demanding that his backstage crew, from the makeup artists to the lowest-ranking luggage handlers, be treated with the exact same VIP respect and dignity as the 7 members of BTS themselves. He completely refuses to let his people be sidelined or disrespected, using his massive global authority to create a safe, fiercely guarded bubble around his team. Beyond physical protection, RM offers something completely unheard of in the incredibly hierarchical Korean entertainment industry: profound, genuine intellectual respect. Stylists and makeup artists are entirely used to being treated as invisible, silent workers whose only purpose is to powder a nose and disappear. But Namjoon, deeply philosophical and constantly consuming art, literature, and culture, actively treats his styling team as brilliant, equal creative collaborators. While sitting in the makeup chair for hours, he doesn't just scroll mindlessly on his phone. He actively engages the staff in deep, fascinating conversations about the specific artistic intent behind their clothing choices, asking for their personal opinions on museum exhibits, and making them feel incredibly valued as true artists in their own right. He remembers their creative suggestions and actively praises them in front of the brutal, unforgiving agency directors. It forces us to take a step back and ask a truly deeply reflective question. In a cutthroat, highly classist society, where people at the very top of the billionaire pyramid usually view the working class as entirely disposable pawns, what does it genuinely say about a man who wields unimaginable global influence, yet willingly bends down to pick up the shattered pieces of a mistake he made, treats his makeup artist like a revered philosophical peer, and boldly risks his own corporate standing to fight for a camera assistant's right to sleep? Kim Namjoon proves that true world-changing leadership is not about standing on a high pedestal and looking down at the masses. It is about standing fiercely on the front lines, taking the heavy hits, and ensuring that every single person walking behind you is safe, respected, and heard. But if you think the clumsy genius's fierce protection of the crew is enough to leave you utterly speechless, you desperately need to prepare your heart for the shocking, incredibly emotional revelation hiding at our number 3 spot. What exactly happens when the member who possesses the most angelic, delicate, and fiercely beloved image in the entire world harbors a secret, terrifyingly intense work ethic that literally drives the production staff to absolute tears of both frustration and awe? Are you truly ready to uncover the beautiful, deadly perfectionism of the man who dances like a dying swan but fights for his art like a wounded warrior? Number 3. Jimin, the angelic swan with a ruthless work ethic. When you think of Park Jimin, the absolute undeniable it boy of the global music industry, your mind is instantly flooded with images of ethereal, untouchable beauty, a mesmerizingly delicate modern dancer who seemingly floats across the stage with the breathtaking, tragic grace of a dying swan. To millions of fans around the world, Jimin is the ultimate, incredibly precious fairy of the group, a man armed with an eye smile so deeply enchanting and a voice so breathtakingly angelic that he completely captivates the hearts of everyone who crosses his path. The public perceives him as the softest, most deeply affectionate member, the one who constantly hugs his bandmates and speaks to the fans with a voice dripping with pure, unadulterated honey. But the absolute jaw-dropping, incredibly emotional truth behind the closed doors of the high practice rooms and the intensely high-pressure backstage dressing rooms paints a chillingly beautiful, wildly different picture that leaves veteran industry professionals completely paralyzed with awe and, very often, genuine tears of heartbreak. You see, the very moment the cameras stop rolling and the stage lights fade into absolute darkness, Jimin's sweet, soft-spoken persona is immediately overshadowed by a terrifying, fiercely ruthless brand of perfectionism that is so insanely intense it completely alters the gravity of the room. In the physically crushing, brutally demanding world of South Korean idol training, where absolute perfection is the bare minimum requirement, Jimin is notoriously known among the production staff as his own absolute worst, most unforgiving enemy. Former backup dancers, vocal directors, and behind-the-scenes documentary crews have openly confessed absolutely heart-wrenching stories about witnessing Jimin completely break down in the shadows, ruthlessly punishing himself over a microscopic, completely unnoticeable vocal crack or a fraction of a second delay in his footwork that literally no one else in the entire stadium even registered. While a typical, arrogant megastar might desperately try to shift the blame onto a faulty earpiece, a slippery stage floor, or an exhausted audio technician to save their own massive ego, Jimin does the exact, devastatingly heartbreaking opposite. He fully and completely internalizes every single perceived flaw, sinking to his knees in the dark corners of the backstage area, profusely apologizing to the breathless staff for ruining the performance and wasting their hard work. This terrifyingly high standard he sets for himself creates an incredibly unique, deeply emotional paradox that flips the traditional celebrity staff dynamic entirely upside down. Instead of the massive production crew fearing the wrath of a demanding diva, the makeup artists, stylists, and bodyguards find themselves desperately, frantically trying to protect this global billionaire superstar from his own fiercely destructive work ethic. Imagine being a seasoned, hardened stage director who has worked with the most arrogant, untouchable divas in the world, only to find yourself literally begging a 20-something pop star to please, for the love of God, stop practicing, sit down, and eat a single meal before he completely collapses from physical exhaustion. During the grueling, notoriously agonizing eras of their career, where extreme dieting and sleep deprivation were rampant, insider accounts revealed that the staff were routinely driven to actual tears of deep, agonizing worry for Jimin. They would secretly sneak high-calorie snacks into his dressing room, hovering around him like deeply protective older siblings, desperately trying to shield the fragile, overworked artist from the soul-crushing weight of his own monumental expectations. But here is the absolutely staggering, beautiful revelation that cements Jimin's legacy as an absolute angel behind the scenes. Despite carrying this suffocating, terrifying mountain of internal pressure and self-doubt, he absolutely never, ever allows his own grueling stress to bleed out onto the people working below him. In fact, he completely weaponizes his own deep emotional vulnerability to become the ultimate, fiercely observant emotional anchor for the entire massive production crew. Jimin possesses a terrifyingly sharp, almost supernatural emotional radar. He can instantly read the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of a stressful video shoot, and he immediately zeroes in on the exact staff members who are secretly suffering. There is a legendary, profoundly moving anecdote from a grueling international tour that completely took over Korean forums, detailing a moment when an exhausted rookie stylist assistant was quietly sobbing in a dark, secluded hallway because she had made a minor mistake and was intensely reprimanded by a senior director. In a cutthroat, highly hierarchical industry where an untouchable A-list idol would normally walk right past a crying minimum wage assistant without a single glance, Jimin completely stopped in his tracks. He didn't just offer a generic word of comfort, he physically approached her, completely ignoring the frantic calls of his own massive security detail, and gently spoke to her in that famously warm, incredibly soothing tone, deeply validating her terrifying stress and absolutely refusing to leave her side until she had completely stopped crying and managed to crack a tiny, relieved smile. He acts as the ultimate emotional sponge for the crew, constantly checking in on the mental health of the camera operators, massaging the incredibly stiff, painful shoulders of the exhausted makeup artists after a brutal 24-hour shoot, and constantly utilizing his deep physical affection to completely obliterate the cold, rigid boundaries of social class and unimaginable wealth. Furthermore, his legendary, fiercely polite manners are absolutely unwavering regardless of how exhausted, sick, or emotionally drained he is. Veteran flight attendants on exclusive, highly private chartered flights have constantly named Jimin as the most breathtakingly polite celebrity they have ever encountered in their entire careers. Even after collapsing into his seat after a brutal 3-hour stadium concert, barely able to keep his eyes open, he will absolutely never hand a piece of trash to a flight attendant with one hand. He forcefully fights through his exhaustion to sit up straight, use both hands, a massive sign of deep, unquestionable respect in Korean culture, and bow his head with profound, genuine gratitude. He treats the invisible, exhausted workers of the world with the exact same immense, fiercely guarded reverence that he treats his own beloved bandmates. It deeply, powerfully forces us to stop and reflect on the true, often terrifying nature of global fame. When a man is completely suffocating under the unimaginably heavy, crushing expectations of millions of fans, constantly tearing his own body apart to achieve an impossible, flawless illusion of absolute perfection, how does he still find the monumental, breathtaking emotional strength to gently wipe the tears of a crying assistant and carry the heavy emotional burdens of the massive crew standing behind him? Park Jimin's jaw-dropping behind-the-scenes reality proves that true, undeniable angelic grace is not just a pretty, marketable concept for a music video. It is the fierce, exhausting, and deeply selfless choice to constantly pour your own warmth into others, even when your own cup is completely empty. But if you think the delicate swan's devastatingly emotional relationship with the staff is enough to leave you paralyzed, you are absolutely not ready for the mind-bending, rule-breaking reality of our number 2 spot. What exactly happens when the undeniably most handsome man in the entire world, a devastatingly charming social butterfly who operates entirely on his own wildly unpredictable frequency, completely refuses to accept the standard professional boundaries of the workplace? Are you truly prepared to uncover the chaotic, hilariously heartwarming truth about the man who aggressively forces the terrified, hyper-professional production crew to become his literal, unapologetic best friends? Number 2. V, the rule-breaking social butterfly who refuses to be a boss. When you gaze upon Kim Taehyung, universally known as V, you are looking at a man who has literally been scientifically and culturally crowned as the most handsome face on the entire planet multiple times over, possessing an absolutely devastating, ethereal visual power that can completely stop traffic and crash entire social media servers with a single blurry photograph. He is the ultimate untouchable muse for luxury fashion houses, a baritone-voiced jazz enthusiast who exudes an incredibly intimidating aristocratic aura of absolute perfection whenever he steps onto a red carpet or poses for a high-fashion magazine cover. If you were a newly hired, incredibly nervous production assistant walking onto a massive music video set, taking one look at this staggeringly beautiful, seemingly untouchable billionaire megastar, you would naturally assume that he strictly demands an impenetrable, heavily guarded VIP bubble surrounded by elite managers and completely isolated from the grueling, unglamorous reality of the working-class crew. You would expect him to demand absolute, terrifying professionalism, keeping a massive, freezing cold wall between his unimaginable celebrity status and the exhausted people holding the boom mics and fixing his tailored suits. However, the jaw-dropping, absolutely hilarious, and deeply heartwarming reality of how Taehyung actually behaves behind the scenes completely obliterates every single established rule of the notoriously strict, heavily hierarchical South Korean entertainment industry. You see, V does not just gently blur the rigid boundaries between a megastar boss and his hired employees, he completely takes a sledgehammer to them, utterly refusing to accept the concept of a professional workplace distance. In the highly stressful, culturally rigid environment of Korean broadcasting, where junior staff members are trained to keep their heads down, speak only when spoken to, and treat idols with absolute trembling reverence, Taehyung operates entirely on his own wildly unpredictable, relentlessly affectionate frequency. Former stylists, bodyguards, and even random foreign camera operators from their overseas tours have openly confessed that within exactly 5 minutes of meeting this globally worshipped icon, he will aggressively force you to drop all formalities and become his literal, unapologetic best friend. Imagine the sheer, terrifying panic of a veteran security director whose sole highly stressful job is to keep massive crowds completely away from the artist, only to turn around and see the artist himself completely wandering off the designated VIP path to excitedly show a random local sound technician a funny video on his phone, casually leaning on the poor paralyzed technician's shoulder as if they had known each other since kindergarten. That is the everyday chaotic reality of managing Kim Taehyung. He is a fiercely unapologetic social butterfly who absolutely hates the isolating, suffocating loneliness of being placed on a celebrity pedestal. Insider accounts have brilliantly detailed how during grueling, mind-numbing waiting periods in claustrophobic backstage dressing rooms, while other celebrities might nap in private isolation or scroll through their phones surrounded by a fortress of silence, Taehyung will literally drag a chair right into the middle of the frantic styling team's workspace, intensely interrogating the makeup artists about their weekend plans, offering unsolicited but incredibly charming dating advice, and forcibly initiating intense, high-stakes video game tournaments with the exhausted lighting crew. He completely strips away his own intimidating godlike aura by stubbornly addressing the older staff members with the deeply affectionate, incredibly casual terms Hyung, older brother, and Nuna, older sister, explicitly forbidding them from treating him like a terrifying boss. But this rule-breaking, chaotic affection goes so deeply beyond just playful backstage banter, it bleeds into a fierce, intensely loyal sense of familial love that leaves industry veterans absolutely speechless. There are famously documented, incredibly heartwarming stories of Taehyung discovering that a staff member was going through a brutal personal hardship, and instead of just having his management send a generic flower basket, he personally, secretly orchestrated incredibly thoughtful surprises. He has been known to casually, without making any grand spectacle, hand over breathtakingly expensive, highly coveted luxury items or custom-made gifts to his stylists, completely brushing off their panicked, trembling refusals by simply stating that it looked like it belonged to them. Furthermore, his deep artistic soul constantly craves genuine, unfiltered human connection, completely disregarding social class or paycheck sizes. During their highly secretive, heavily guarded overseas travels, when the massive production crew is completely exhausted and just wants to quietly eat their cheap takeout meals in the corner of the hotel lobby, Taehyung will notoriously refuse to eat in his luxury 5-star presidential suite. Instead, he will actively hunt down the staff, dragging his own plate of food and casually plop himself down cross-legged right on the floor next to the lowest-ranking camera assistants, happily stealing their French fries and engaging in deep, soulful conversations about art, photography, and the meaning of life. He doesn't just treat the staff like equals, he actively, stubbornly demands that they treat him as a normal, incredibly clingy 20-something guy who just wants to hang out with his friends. There is even a legendary incident where Taehyung was spotted fiercely playing and running around like an absolute child with the manager's young toddler backstage, completely ruining his meticulously styled hair and expensive designer outfit, caring absolutely 0% about his untouchable idol image just to make a baby laugh. It forces you to pause and deeply, intensely reflect on the isolating nature of unimaginable fame and the desperate human need for genuine connection. In an incredibly toxic, image-obsessed industry that violently forces celebrities to lock themselves away in lonely ivory towers, viewing the working class as nothing more than disposable, invisible background characters, what does it genuinely say about a man who wields the power of a global king, yet absolutely refuses to wear the crown? Kim Taehyung's shockingly casual, aggressively affectionate behind-the-scenes behavior proves that true, undeniable magnetism isn't about maintaining a cold, untouchable aura of perfection. It is about having the breathtaking, reckless vulnerability to tear down your own walls and invite the entire world into your heart, turning a highly stressful, terrifying workplace into a chaotic, deeply loving family gathering. But if you think the chaotic social butterfly's aggressive friendship with the staff is enough to absolutely blow your mind, you are completely unprepared for the earth-shattering, tear-jerking, and utterly unbelievable reality of our final #1 spot. We have covered the ice-breaking dad jokes, the silent guardianship, the terrifying dance captain, the clumsy genius, the delicate perfectionist, and the rule-breaking friend. But what happens when you combine the absolute youngest member of the group, a man armed with the most devastatingly powerful, globally dominating talent in the industry, with a deeply ingrained, almost heartbreakingly pure sense of immense humility that fundamentally alters the entire landscape of Korean entertainment? Are you truly mentally and emotionally ready to uncover the absolute unbelievable truth about how the golden maknae treats the people who raised him in the shadows? A truth so profoundly moving, it will permanently change how you view celebrity culture, forever. Number 1. Jungkook, the golden maknae who refuses to drop his crown of humility. When you think of Jungkook, the undisputed, globally dominating golden maknae of BTS, you are envisioning a literal pop music titan who has shattered every conceivable international streaming record, performed completely solo on the impossibly massive stage of the FIFA World Cup, and commands a terrifyingly powerful global influence that rivals the biggest Western pop icons in music history. He is the phenomenally gifted prodigy who can sing like an absolute angel, dance with bone-crushing power, direct music videos, and seemingly conquer any human task he attempts with terrifying ease. If there were ever a single person on the face of the earth who had the absolute, undeniable right to succumb to the intoxicating poison of global megastardom, to demand an untouchable throne, and to treat the massive production crew around him as mere stepping stones to his unimaginable billionaire success, it would undoubtedly be him. Yet the jaw-dropping, deeply emotional, and profoundly staggering reality of how Jungkook treats the very people standing in the shadows completely shatters every single stereotype of a spoiled, out-of-touch celebrity, bringing veteran industry executives and hardened broadcast technicians to literal tears of pure awe. To truly, deeply understand the impossible humility of this global icon, you have to rewind time and understand that Jungkook essentially grew up inside the cold, grueling walls of the entertainment agency. Arriving in Seoul as a terrified, fiercely shy 15-year-old boy from Busan, the massive production staff, the managers, and the older crew members did not just work for him, they literally, fundamentally raised him. They fed him, guided him, and wiped his tears when he missed his family in the dead of night. And the absolute earth-shattering miracle of Jungkook is that despite becoming one of the most famous, untouchable men on the entire planet, he has never, for a single second, forgotten the immense, crushing debt of gratitude he owes to those invisible people. His deeply ingrained, almost heartbreakingly pure humility manifests in ways that completely break the rigid, deeply hierarchical rules of the South Korean broadcast industry. Let me take you back to a wildly famous, heavily documented incident at the Idol Star Athletics Championships, ISAC, a notoriously grueling, massive broadcast event where hundreds of K-pop idols gather and the lower-ranking staff members are treated like absolute invisible garbage disposal units, forced to clean up massive piles of trash left behind by arrogant celebrities. while dozens of other famous idols casually walked past the exhausted janitorial staff, completely ignoring the massive mess on the stadium floor. An eagle-eyed fan camera captured something so deeply unbelievable it went instantly viral across national television. There was Jungkook, the biggest superstar in the entire arena, entirely separated from his group, quietly and intensely walking around with a massive plastic bag, personally picking up discarded water bottles, half-eaten snack wrappers, and dirty napkins, desperately trying to help the exhausted staff members clean the floor. He didn't have a camera crew filming him for a PR stunt. He simply saw tired workers struggling and immediately, instinctively bent down to serve them, his face completely hidden under a cap. But this terrifyingly beautiful humility extends so deeply into his everyday high-stakes work environment. Former camera directors and heavy-lifting production assistants have shared absolute tear-jerking testimonies of Jungkook completely refusing to let the crew carry all the heavy, bone-crushing equipment by themselves. After wrapping up completely exhausting multi-day music video shoots in freezing temperatures or sweltering heat, when the entire crew is practically collapsing from physical exhaustion, and the other celebrities are instantly rushing to their heated VIP vans, Jungkook will actively, stubbornly stay behind. He is notoriously known for rolling up his sleeves, ignoring the panicked screams of his managers who are desperately trying to protect his million-dollar body, and physically carrying massive, heavy lighting rigs, coiled cables, and massive prop boxes alongside the minimum-wage production assistants. He treats his own massive, godlike physical strength not as a tool for vanity, but as a resource to desperately lighten the agonizing physical burden of the working-class crew. Furthermore, in an industry perfectly accustomed to the celebrity nod, a dismissive, arrogant micro-bow given by top stars to their inferiors, Jungkook is legendary for his fierce, unbroken folder bow. Even after absolutely destroying a live stadium performance, hyperventilating, entirely drenched in sweat, and literally unable to stand on his own 2 feet, Jungkook will physically force himself to walk down the incredibly long line of the massive production crew, bending his entire body perfectly in half at a strict 90-degree angle, making deep, intense eye contact with every single backup dancer, audio technician, and makeup artist, screaming his raw, unfiltered gratitude until his voice completely gives out. During his historic, deeply terrifying solo World Cup schedule in Qatar, surrounded by foreign dignitaries and massive security, he was constantly spotted bowing deeply to the hotel cleaning staff, treating the invisible workers with the exact same immense, staggering respect he gave to the Qatari royalty. He even bought massive amounts of expensive food and drinks for the local dancers, treating them with a level of intense, genuine warmth that left the international crew utterly speechless. Can you even begin to comprehend the monumental, completely unbelievable level of psychological grounding it takes for a man who is literally worshipped as a god by millions of screaming fans to actively, aggressively choose to view himself as the absolute lowest person in the room? What happens to your heart when you realize that the man who holds the entire music industry in the palm of his hand literally bursts into agonizing tears, not because of his own grueling hardships, intense physical pain, or unimaginable pressure, but simply because he hates seeing the production staff and his older brothers completely exhausted? How does a global billionaire actively maintain the innocent, fiercely protective soul of a 15-year-old boy from Busan who just wants to make his staff proud? Jungkook's breathtaking, reality-altering behind-the-scenes truth proves that true, undeniable kingship does not come from the expensive crowns you wear, the luxury cars you drive, or the massive records you break. It comes from having the absolute world-conquering power to rule the world and actively choosing every single day to kneel on the cold studio floor and fiercely serve the people who built your throne, leaving an unbelievable legacy of pure, unadulterated kindness that will permanently echo through the history of the music industry.